I never thought shoveling snow at 5 in the morning would land me in legal trouble. But here I was, staring at a $200 fine from the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association for excessive noise during quiet hours. My name is Brandon Quinlan, and I have lived in Pine Ridge, Minnesota for 3 years now. The neighborhood sits just outside of Duluth, where winter hits hard and fast. When I bought my modest 2-story house on Birchwood Lane, the real estate agent mentioned the HOA in passing, calling it very organized and helpful. That should have been my first warning sign. Nothing good ever comes from the words very organized when talking about suburban busybodies. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in late January. Minnesota winters are brutal, and we had gotten about 8 inches of snow overnight. I woke up at 4:30 like I always do, hit the gym by 5, and planned to be at my construction site by 7. But when I looked out my window and saw the fresh snowfall blanketing everything, I knew I needed to shovel before heading out. My driveway connects to the main street, and if I did not clear it early, the plows would push even more snow into my entrance, making it nearly impossible to get my truck out. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I got dressed, grabbed my snow shovel, and went outside at 5:15 in the morning to clear my driveway. The air was crisp and still, the kind of quiet you only get after a heavy snowfall. I worked efficiently, tossing snow to the side, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The whole job took me maybe 30 minutes. By 5:45, my driveway was clear, and I was back inside making coffee. I thought nothing of it until Thursday afternoon, when I came home from work to find a certified letter taped to my front door. The envelope had the Pine Ridge HOA logo embossed on it, which immediately made my stomach sink. I ripped it open right there on my porch. "Dear Mr. Quinlan," it read in that passive-aggressive formal tone that HOA letters always seem to have. "It has come to our attention that on January 23rd at approximately 5:15 a.m., you were engaged in snow removal activities that violated Section 7.3 of the Pine Ridge Community Guidelines, which states that no homeowner shall engage in activities producing noise levels exceeding 45 decibels during designated quiet hours of 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. As this is your first violation, you are being assessed a fine of $200, payable within 14 days. Future violations will result in increased penalties. Sincerely, Deborah Fletcher, President, Pine Ridge HOA. I stood there reading the letter 3 times, certain I was missing something. A fine for shoveling snow. I was not running a snowblower or operating heavy machinery. I was using a manual shovel, for crying out loud. The scraping sound it made against my driveway could not possibly have exceeded 45 decibels. That is barely louder than a normal conversation. I went inside and immediately pulled up the HOA guidelines on my laptop. Sure enough, there was Section 7.3, written in the vaguest possible language that could theoretically be interpreted to cover everything from playing loud music to apparently shoveling your own driveway. But nowhere did it specify what activities were actually prohibited. It just said activities producing noise. This was ridiculous. I had work at 7, which meant I needed to leave by 6:30 at the latest. When else was I supposed to shovel? Let the snow pile up and potentially get stuck in my own driveway. That would probably result in another fine for failure to maintain property appearance or some other made-up violation. I decided to call Deborah Fletcher directly. Her number was listed on the HOA website as the primary contact for community concerns. She answered on the 3rd ring. Pine Ridge HOA, Deborah speaking. "Hi Deborah, this is Brandon Quinlan from Birchwood Lane. I just received a letter about a fine for shoveling snow, and I think there has been some kind of mistake." There was a pause, then her voice came back, dripping with false politeness. "Oh, Mr. Quinlan, yes, I filed that complaint myself. There is no mistake. You filed it, so you were the one who heard me shoveling. I live 2 houses down from you, and yes, I was awakened at 5:15 in the morning by the sound of scraping and banging. It was completely unacceptable." 2 houses down. She lived 2 houses down and claimed my manual snow shovel woke her up. Either she had superhuman hearing, or this was about something else entirely. "Deborah, I have to be at work by 7. I need to clear my driveway before the plows come through, or I will be stuck." "When exactly am I supposed to shovel?" "That is not my concern, Mr. Quinlan. The rules are very clear. No excessive noise before 7 a.m. Perhaps you should consider adjusting your work schedule or parking on the street." Park on the street, in Minnesota, after a snowfall. She was either incredibly naive or deliberately being difficult. "And if I do not pay this fine?" I asked, already knowing I was not going to like the answer. "Then we will add late fees, and eventually we can place a lien on your property." The HOA takes community standards very seriously, Mr. Quinlan. I suggest you pay the fine and adjust your behavior going forward. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, anger building in my chest. This woman, this middle-aged busybody with apparently nothing better to do than monitor the neighborhood for sounds at 5 in the morning, was threatening to put a lien on my house because I shoveled snow. I spent the rest of Thursday evening researching HOA laws in Minnesota. Turns out, HOAs have a surprising amount of power. They can fine you, place liens on your property, and make your life miserable with legal fees if you try to fight them. But they also have to follow certain procedures and their own bylaws. I printed out our entire HOA agreement and spent hours reading through the dense legal language. That is when I noticed something interesting. Section 12.5 stated that the HOA was responsible for maintaining all common areas and thoroughfares within the community. I checked the property survey documents from when I bought my house. The main entrance to Pine Ridge, where Birchwood Lane connected to the public road, was technically classified as a common area. The HOA was responsible for keeping it clear and accessible. Friday morning, we got another 4 inches of snow. I deliberately did not shovel my driveway. Instead, I watched from my window as Deborah Fletcher came out of her house at 6:30, already dressed in her puffy winter coat and ridiculous fur-trimmed boots. She stood in her driveway for a moment, looking toward my house. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out if I was going to give her another reason to fine me. I waited until 7:05, safely past the quiet hours threshold, then went out and cleared my driveway. By then, the plows had already come through twice, pushing massive piles of snow into everyone's driveways. It took me nearly an hour to clear everything, and I was late to work. But I did not give Deborah any ammunition. When I got home that evening, I drove slowly through the neighborhood, paying attention to things I had never really noticed before. Pine Ridge had about 40 houses, all built in the same bland suburban style. The main entrance had a decorative stone wall with Pine Ridge spelled out in bronze letters. Just past that entrance, before you actually entered the neighborhood, there was a cluster of mailboxes where all the residents picked up their mail. The Postal Service did not deliver to individual houses here. Everything went to the central mailbox unit. And that mailbox area, according to the property documents I had reviewed, was part of the HOA-maintained common area. I parked and walked over to the mailboxes, pretending to check my mail while actually surveying the situation. The mailbox cluster sat on a small concrete pad, surrounded by grass in the summer, but currently buried under snow. The postal carrier would have to park on the side of the access road to deliver mail. And that access road, that narrow strip of pavement leading from the public street to the mailbox cluster, was absolutely covered in snow. Normally, someone cleared it. I had never thought about who or when, but it was always passable. Except today, I noticed the snow was getting pretty deep. The postal carrier had clearly struggled to get through. There were tire tracks cutting through about 6 inches of accumulation. An idea started forming in my head. It was petty. It was probably going to make my neighbors angry. But I was so tired of HOAs and their arbitrary rules and their power-hungry board members who had nothing better to do than harass working people for trying to maintain their own property. Saturday brought another snowfall. Minnesota was really piling it on this year. I spent the morning at my kitchen table, drafting a letter of my own. I made it very formal, very official sounding. "Dear Pine Ridge HOA Board," I wrote. "I am writing to formally request that the HOA fulfill its maintenance obligations regarding the common areas of our community, specifically the mailbox access road as defined in Section 12.5 of our community guidelines. As a dues-paying member of this association, I expect these common areas to be properly maintained and accessible. Please confirm when this maintenance will be completed. Sincerely, Quinlan." I printed 3 copies, signed them all, and mailed one via certified mail to Deborah Fletcher's address, which was listed as the official HOA mailing address. I kept one for my records and put one in my truck. Then I waited. Sunday morning, I woke up early and checked the mailbox access road. It had not been plowed or cleared. The snow was now at least 8 inches deep in the access area, with drifts pushing it even higher on the sides. I could see where the postal carrier had driven through on Friday, but those tracks were now filled in with fresh snow. Monday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so there was no mail delivery. But Tuesday morning, I made sure to drive past the mailboxes on my way to work. The postal truck was there, and I could see the carrier struggling to navigate through the snow. He made it barely, but he did not look happy about it. Tuesday evening, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Quinlan, this is Deborah Fletcher. I received your letter and I do not appreciate your tone." My tone. "I was simply requesting that the HOA fulfill its maintenance obligations. Is there a problem? The mailbox area will be cleared when we have time. We have limited resources, and snow removal is not our top priority." "That is interesting," I said, keeping my voice level. "Because enforcing noise ordinances at 5 in the morning seems to be a top priority. I am just asking for the same attention to detail. This is completely different. You violated community guidelines, and the HOA is violating its maintenance responsibilities. Section 12.5 is very clear. Common areas must be maintained." I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "Fine. We will get to it when we can. But your fine is still due by February 6th, Mr. Quinlan. I suggest you pay it. We will see," I said and hung up. Wednesday brought another 3 inches of snow. I was starting to wonder if Minnesota was trying to break some kind of record. The mailbox access road was now completely impassable for a normal vehicle. I drove past at lunchtime and saw that the postal carrier had not even attempted delivery. There was a note stuck to the mailbox cluster stating that mail delivery was suspended until the access road was cleared. My phone started ringing that evening. First, it was my neighbor across the street, Margaret, an elderly woman who was always nice to me. "Brandon, honey, did you see the note at the mailboxes? We are not getting mail until that road is cleared." Do you know what happened? The HOA usually takes care of that. I am not sure, Margaret. You might want to call Deborah Fletcher. She is the HOA president. Then it was another neighbor, Thomas, who lived 3 houses down. Hey man, what is going on with the mailboxes? I am expecting an important package. You should contact the HOA. It is their responsibility to maintain that area. By Thursday morning, my phone had 6 voicemails from various neighbors, all asking about the mail situation. I did not call anyone back. Instead, I sent another email to Deborah Fletcher. Dear Miss Fletcher, I noticed that mail delivery has been suspended due to the inaccessible condition of the HOA-maintained mailbox access road. As I mentioned in my previous letter, this is a violation of the HOA's maintenance responsibilities under Section 12.5. Please advise when this issue will be resolved. Sincerely, Brandon Quinlan. She called me within an hour, and this time she was not even pretending to be polite. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here, Mr. Quinlan? I am trying to get my mail, Deborah. Same as everyone else in the neighborhood. You know damn well that you are behind this somehow. That road has never been a problem before. Really? Because it seems like the HOA has always been responsible for maintaining it, and right now, you are not doing your job. Meanwhile, you are fining me for doing mine. This is harassment. No, this is me asking you to follow the same rules you are forcing on me. If I have to pay attention to every single line of the HOA guidelines, then so do you. Clear the mailbox access road, Deborah. It is literally in your job description. She made a sound somewhere between a growl and a sigh. We do not have the equipment to clear that much snow right now. Our usual contractor is backed up with other properties. That sounds like a planning problem. Maybe you should have thought about that before we got 2 feet of snow. But until the road is clear, I guess none of us are getting mail. You are enjoying this, are not you? You are deliberately letting our neighbors suffer just to make a point. I am not letting anything happen. I am not the HOA president. I am not the one responsible for maintaining common areas. That is you, Deborah. This is all you. I hung up and felt a surge of satisfaction. Was I being petty? Absolutely. Was I technically in the right? Also, yes. The HOA wanted to play games with rules and regulations, so I was playing right back. Friday morning, I got another certified letter. This one was not from Deborah, but from someone named Patricia Norton, who identified herself as the HOA treasurer. Dear Mr. Quinlan, this letter serves as a formal notice that your fine of $200 for violation of community noise ordinances is now past due. Additionally, you are being assessed a late fee of $50. Total amount due, $250. Please remit payment immediately to avoid further penalties. Regards, Patricia Norton, Treasurer, Pine Ridge HOA. I had to laugh. The fine was not even past due yet. The original letter said I had 14 days and it had only been 9. They were just making things up now, trying to pressure me into paying. I wrote another email, this time copying both Deborah and Patricia. Dear HOA Board, I received a notice claiming my fine is past due, but according to the original letter dated January 24th, I have until February 6th to pay. Today is February 2nd, which means the fine is not past due, and any late fees are invalid. I will not be paying any fees until the HOA fulfills its maintenance obligations regarding the mailbox access road, which has now been impassable for 4 days, denying all residents access to mail service. This is a clear violation of Section 12.5 and is causing significant inconvenience to the entire community. Sincerely, Brandon Quinlan. That evening, I came home to find a small crowd of neighbors gathered near the mailboxes. About 8 people were standing around, some of them gesturing angrily at the snow-covered access road. I parked my truck and walked over. "Brandon," Thomas called out when he saw me. "Do you know what is going on? We have not had mail in almost a week." "The HOA is responsible for clearing this area," I said, gesturing to the access road. "It is in the community guidelines, section 12.5. "Well, why are they not clearing it?" Margaret asked, bundling her coat tighter against the cold. "That is a question for Deborah Fletcher," I said. Another neighbor, a guy I recognized but whose name I did not know, spoke up. "I called Deborah yesterday. She said they are working on it, but their contractor is busy. I am missing important documents for my taxes. This is ridiculous." "You should file a formal complaint with the HOA board," I suggested. "If enough people complain, maybe they will prioritize it." Margaret looked at me suspiciously. "Why do you know so much about the HOA guidelines all of a sudden?" I shrugged. "I have been reading up on them lately. Just trying to understand what I am paying dues for." The group eventually dispersed, everyone grumbling about the mail situation. I went home and made dinner, feeling only slightly guilty about the situation I had created. These people were not my real targets after all. But Deborah had made this personal when she decided to fine me for shoveling my own driveway, and I was not about to back down. Saturday morning brought a knock on my door. I opened it to find Deborah Fletcher standing on my porch, her face red either from cold or anger, possibly both. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. I was not about to have this conversation where the whole neighborhood could hear. She stomped into my living room, snow falling off her boots onto my floor. She did not bother taking them off. "You need to stop this nonsense right now." "Stop what exactly?" "You know exactly what. The mailbox situation. I have had 20 phone calls from neighbors demanding to know when they can get their mail. People are threatening to quit the HOA." "Sounds like you have a maintenance problem," I said, sitting down on my couch. I did not offer her a seat. "I know this is about the fine. You are mad that we called you out for breaking the rules, so now you are trying to punish the entire neighborhood." "I am not doing anything to the neighborhood. I am not the one who has failed to maintain the common areas. That is literally your job, Deborah, not mine. It has been non-stop snow for a week. Our contractor is overwhelmed. We are doing the best we can." And I was doing the best I could when I shoveled my driveway at 5 in the morning so I could get to work. But you fined me anyway. You did not care about my situation, so why should I care about yours? She glared at me, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "What do you want?" "You want us to waive the fine. Fine. Consider it waived. Now will you let us clear the access road?" "Let you? I am not stopping you from clearing anything. Go ahead. Call your contractor right now. Clear the road." "You know damn well what I mean." "You have been agitating the neighbors, making them call and complain, stirring up trouble." "I have been informing them of their rights under the HOA guidelines. That is not agitating. That is education." Deborah took a step closer, her voice dropping to something just above a hiss. "I have lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I helped write these guidelines. I know every single rule, every single clause. If you want to play this game, I promise you, I will find every possible violation you have ever committed, and I will fine you into oblivion." I stood up, meeting her eye to eye. "Go ahead. I have read those guidelines front to back 3 times now. I follow every single rule. But you know what I also found? A lot of rules that the HOA is not following, like Section 12.5 and Section 8.2, which requires the HOA to maintain liability insurance for common areas. Do you have that insurance, Deborah?" Because if someone gets hurt trying to navigate that snow-filled access road, and the HOA is found negligent in maintaining it, that is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Her face went pale. Are you threatening to sue the HOA? I am pointing out that you are not following your own rules while demanding that everyone else does. You cannot have it both ways. Either we all follow the guidelines, including you, or they do not mean anything. She stood there for a long moment, clearly trying to think of a comeback. Finally, she turned and stormed toward the door. "This is not over," she spat before slamming it behind her. I sat back down on my couch, my heart pounding. That had been intense, but I was not backing down. This was about principle now. Sunday morning, I woke to the sound of heavy machinery. I looked out my window to see a large plow truck clearing the mailbox access road. Behind it was a smaller truck spreading salt and sand. Deborah was standing nearby, supervising the operation, her arms crossed over her chest. The road was clear within an hour. I watched from my window as the postal carrier showed up around noon to deliver the backed-up mail. There was a line of neighbors waiting at the mailboxes, everyone eager to get their accumulated letters and packages. I figured that would be the end of it. The road was clear, mail service was restored, and maybe Deborah had learned a lesson about arbitrary enforcement of rules. I should have known better. Monday evening, I found another letter from the HOA. This one was much longer and listed a series of alleged violations. According to Deborah, my house numbers were 2 inches too small per section 4.7. My garbage cans were visible from the street in violation of section 6.3. My lawn had unacceptable brown patches, violating section 5.1. And I had failed to remove Christmas decorations within the required time frame per section 9.8. Each violation carried a $50 fine. Total, $200, which when added to the original shoveling fine and their made-up late fee, brought my total to $450. I laughed out loud reading it. This was exactly what she had threatened. She was going to find every possible violation, real or imagined, and fine me for all of them. The thing was, most of these violations were complete nonsense. My house numbers were the standard 4-inch size required by the city. My garbage cans were in my garage except on pickup day, when everyone put them on the street. The brown patches in my lawn were because it was winter and covered in snow, and I did not have any Christmas decorations up because I had taken them down in early January. This was harassment, plain and simple, and it was about to get very expensive for the HOA. I spent Tuesday morning consulting with a lawyer. His name was Robert Chen, and he specialized in property law and HOA disputes. I laid out everything that had happened, the original fine, the mailbox situation, and now this list of bogus violations. Robert listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and nodded. "You have a pretty strong case for harassment. These violations are clearly retaliatory, and most of them are not even legitimate. The problem is, fighting an HOA can be expensive. Legal fees add up quickly, and even if you win, you still have to live in the neighborhood with these people." "What are my options?" I asked. "You can pay the fines and move on, which obviously you do not want to do. You can fight each fine individually through the HOA's internal dispute process, but that is rigged in their favor. Or you can file a lawsuit claiming harassment, improper enforcement of guidelines, and failure to maintain common areas. That last one is particularly interesting because you documented their neglect of the mailbox access road. What would a lawsuit accomplish? At minimum, it would get the fines dismissed. At best, you could argue for damages, legal fees, and possibly even force changes to the HOA board. But like I said, It is expensive and time-consuming. I thought about it for a moment. What if we just threaten the lawsuit? Send them a formal letter laying out the case, making it clear that we are prepared to file if they do not back down. Robert smiled. That is often effective. Most HOA boards are run by volunteers who do not want the headache of actual litigation. A strongly worded letter from an attorney can make them reconsider. Want me to draft something? Absolutely. 2 days later, Robert sent a 5-page letter to the Pine Ridge HOA board with copies to Deborah Fletcher and Patricia Norton. The letter methodically tore apart every fine they had issued, cited case law about HOA harassment, detailed their failure to maintain common areas, and concluded with a clear statement that if the fines were not withdrawn within 10 days, we would file a lawsuit seeking damages, legal fees, and an injunction against further harassment. I paid Robert his $500 retainer and waited to see what would happen. The response came faster than I expected. Friday morning, I got a phone call from Patricia Norton, the treasurer. Mr. Quinlan, I received the letter from your attorney. I want you to know that I had nothing to do with these recent fines. That was all Deborah. Okay, I said cautiously. So what happens now? There is going to be an emergency HOA board meeting on Sunday evening. We would like you to attend. I think we can resolve this without getting lawyers involved. I am already involving lawyers. That ship has sailed. Please, Mr. Quinlan, just come to the meeting, hear us out. If you are not satisfied, you can proceed with the lawsuit, but give us a chance to fix this. Something in her tone made me believe she was sincere. Fine. Where and when? Sunday at 6 p.m. at the community center on Maple Street. The meeting is open to all residents, but we are specifically asking you to come. Sunday evening, I drove to the community center, which was a small building at the edge of Pine Ridge that the HOA used for meetings and events. I had never actually been inside before. The parking lot was packed, which surprised me. Apparently, word had gotten out that this was going to be an interesting meeting. Inside, the main room was set up with rows of folding chairs facing a table where the HOA board sat. I recognized Deborah Fletcher in the center, looking like she had been sucking on lemons. Patricia Norton sat to her left, and 3 other board members I did not know filled out the rest of the table. The room was filled with neighbors, at least 30 people, which had to be a huge turnout for an HOA meeting. Margaret waved at me from the 3rd row, and Thomas gave me a nod. I took a seat near the back, wanting to be able to observe everything. Patricia called the meeting to order and started with standard HOA business, approving minutes from the last meeting and discussing the budget. But everyone was clearly waiting for the main event. After about 10 minutes of preamble, Patricia cleared her throat. As many of you know, we have been dealing with a dispute between the board and one of our residents, Brandon Quinlan. Brandon, could you please stand so everyone knows who you are? I stood briefly, and half the room turned to look at me. I sat back down quickly. Patricia continued. This dispute began with a fine issued for early morning snow removal and has escalated significantly. Brandon's attorney has sent us a letter threatening legal action, and the board has been reviewing the situation carefully. We would like to address this matter publicly and transparently. Deborah shifted in her seat but did not say anything. After reviewing all the documentation, Patricia went on. It is the opinion of the board, minus 1 dissenting vote, that the initial fine was issued inappropriately. The HOA guidelines regarding noise violations were written with the intent to prevent genuinely disruptive activities like late-night parties or early morning construction. They were not intended to prevent residents from performing basic maintenance like snow removal. There were murmurs of agreement from the audience. Furthermore, Patricia said, the subsequent fines issued to Mr. Quinlan have been reviewed and found to be without merit. The board, again minus one dissenting vote, has decided to withdraw all fines against Mr. Quinlan and issue a formal apology for the manner in which this situation was handled. Deborah stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. We are setting a precedent that residents can just ignore the rules whenever they find them inconvenient. Patricia looked at her firmly. Deborah, we discussed this. The rules were misapplied in this case. Mr. Quinlan was performing necessary maintenance to his property. He was not violating the spirit of the noise ordinance. The rules are the rules, Deborah insisted. If we start making exceptions, the entire HOA becomes meaningless. That is when Thomas stood up from his seat. Can I say something? Patricia nodded. The floor is open to residents. Thomas turned to address the room. I have lived here for 8 years, and I have watched this HOA become more and more aggressive about enforcing petty rules while ignoring actual problems. Last year, I got fined for having my garage door open for more than 2 hours on a Saturday while I was cleaning it out. 2 hours. Meanwhile, the street lights at the entrance have been broken for 6 months, and nobody has fixed them because the HOA says it is not in the budget. This is not about rules. This is about priorities. Other people started speaking up. I got fined for putting my garbage cans out the night before pickup instead of the morning of, a woman I did not recognize said. I work night shifts. I can't put them out in the morning. They sent me a warning because my mailbox post needed repainting, an older man added. It was barely faded and they gave me 10 days to fix it or face a fine. Margaret stood up, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. When my husband died last year, I fell behind on some yard work. Instead of offering to help or even just giving me some grace, I got fined. A $50 fine because I had not trimmed my hedges to the exact height specified in the guidelines. I was mourning, and the HOA was measuring my bushes. The room erupted in conversation, everyone suddenly sharing their grievances about HOA overreach. Patricia had to bang a gavel to restore order. It is clear that many residents have concerns about how the HOA has been operating, Patricia said diplomatically. This is something the board needs to take seriously. Deborah looked furious. You are all being manipulated by Mr. Quinlan. He deliberately let the mailbox access road become impassable just to make a point. He held the entire neighborhood's mail hostage because he was mad about a fine. And now you are all acting like he is the victim. I stood up. Can I respond to that? Patricia nodded. Deborah is right about one thing, I said, and I heard surprised murmurs. I did use the mailbox situation to make a point, but I did not create the situation. The HOA is responsible for maintaining that access road under Section 12.5 of our guidelines. It is literally written in the rules that Deborah claims to care so much about. When we got multiple snowfalls last week, the HOA failed to do its job. I simply pointed out that failure. You could have cleared it yourself, Deborah shot back. You could have helped your neighbors instead of letting them suffer. It was not my responsibility. It was yours. And you know what? If you had not fined me for shoveling my own driveway, I probably would have helped. I would have grabbed my shovel and cleared that access road myself, just to be a good neighbor. But you taught me a lesson, Deborah. You taught me that in Pine Ridge, we do not help each other out of kindness. We follow the exact letter of the rules, and we fine people when they do not. So I followed your example. I let the HOA do its job, exactly as specified in Section 12.5. Several people actually clapped. Deborah looked like she was about to explode. Patricia intervened before things could escalate further. I think we have established that there are issues with how our HOA has been operating. The board will be conducting a comprehensive review of our enforcement policies and priorities. In the meantime, all fines against Mr. Quinlan are withdrawn, effective immediately. Additionally, we will be implementing a new appeals process for any future fines, giving residents a fair opportunity to contest charges they believe are unjust. I vote against all of this, Deborah said flatly. Your dissent is noted, Patricia replied. But you are 1 vote out of 5, and you have been outvoted on every point. The motion passes. Deborah gathered her papers and stood up. Then I resigned from the board, effective immediately. Clearly, my dedication to maintaining community standards is not appreciated here. I will not be part of an HOA that allows chaos and disrespect to flourish. She stormed out of the community center, leaving stunned silence in her wake. Patricia sighed. Well, I suppose we will need to hold elections for a new president. In the meantime, as treasurer, I will assume interim leadership. This meeting is adjourned. People started filing out, but several neighbors came up to talk to me. Thomas shook my hand. Man, you really stuck it to Deborah. That was amazing. I did not mean to cause this much drama, I said honestly. I just wanted to shovel my driveway without getting fined. Margaret patted my arm. Sometimes drama is necessary. This HOA needed a wake-up call. Over the next few weeks, things settled down. Patricia proved to be a much more reasonable HOA president than Deborah had been. She sent out a community survey asking residents what they actually wanted the HOA to focus on. The responses were overwhelmingly in favor of maintenance issues like streetlights, common area upkeep, and snow removal, rather than enforcement of petty aesthetic rules. I thought that was the end of the story. I was wrong. In early March, about 5 weeks after the dramatic board meeting, I got a call from Patricia. Brandon, we have a problem. A potentially serious problem. What kind of problem? I asked. Deborah has been our treasurer for the past 3 years, and she was president for the past 5. When she resigned, we started going through the HOA financial records to transition everything to the new treasurer. We have found some significant discrepancies. My stomach dropped. What kind of discrepancies? Money is missing. A lot of money. We are talking about potentially $30,000 over the past 3 years that cannot be accounted for. We have records of dues being collected, but the bank account does not reflect the proper balance. I have been going through transaction records, and there are dozens of withdrawals marked as maintenance expenses or contractor payments that do not have corresponding invoices or receipts. You think Deborah was stealing from the HOA? I do not want to jump to conclusions, but something is very wrong. I have contacted the police, and they are sending someone over to look at the records. I wanted to give you a heads up because this might get complicated. 2 days later, a detective named Sarah Morrison came to interview me. She was in her 40s, professional and thorough. We sat in my living room while she took notes. Mr. Quinlan, I understand you had a dispute with Deborah Fletcher that led to her resignation from the HOA board. Can you walk me through what happened? I explained everything, from the original shoveling fine to the mailbox situation to the board meeting. Detective Morrison listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Did Miss Fletcher ever mention financial issues with the HOA? Any concerns about the budget or expenses? No, nothing like that. Our dispute was entirely about enforcement of rules. Did you ever see her with expensive items or notice any sudden lifestyle changes? I thought about it. Actually, yeah. She got a new Lexus SUV a few months ago. I remember because she made a point of parking it where everyone could see it. And last summer, she was bragging about a cruise to Alaska she and her husband took. I do not know if that means anything. Detective Morrison made a note. It might. We are trying to establish whether she had means and opportunity to embezzle funds. The HOA records show she had sole access to the bank account and complete authority to make withdrawals without board approval. That seems like a terrible system, I said. It is, but it is common in small HOAs. They are run by volunteers who trust each other, and financial controls are often lacking. Over the next few weeks, the investigation ramped up. Detective Morrison interviewed other board members and neighbors. She subpoenaed bank records and cross-referenced them with HOA documentation. The whole neighborhood was buzzing with gossip and speculation. I felt weird about the whole thing. On one hand, if Deborah had actually stolen money from the HOA, she deserved to be held accountable. On the other hand, I could not help but feel partially responsible for exposing the situation. If I had not pushed back against her fines, she would still be running the HOA and might never have been caught. In mid-April, Detective Morrison called to tell me they were pressing charges. The forensic accounting had revealed that Deborah had embezzled approximately $37,000 over a 3-year period. She had been issuing checks to fake contractors, making cash withdrawals marked as petty cash for expenses that never happened, and in a few cases, simply transferring money to her personal account and marking it as reimbursement for supplies she never purchased. "We arrested her this morning," Detective Morrison said. "She is being charged with felony theft and fraud. Given the amount involved, she is looking at significant prison time if convicted." "Wow," was all I could manage to say. "You might be called as a witness if this goes to trial. Your testimony about her behavior and the HOA's financial controls could be relevant." "Whatever you need," I said. The arrest made the local news. "HOA president arrested for embezzlement" was the headline in the Duluth News Tribune. The article detailed the charges and included comments from Patricia Norton about implementing better financial oversight. Several neighbors were quoted expressing shock and betrayal. Deborah's husband, Michael, filed for divorce 2 weeks after her arrest. Apparently, he had no idea about the embezzlement and was humiliated by the whole situation. The Lexus was repossessed, and their house went up for sale. In June, Deborah accepted a plea deal to avoid trial. She pleaded guilty to felony theft and agreed to repay the full $37,000 to the HOA. In exchange for her cooperation and repayment plan, she received a sentence of 18 months in prison followed by 3 years of probation. I did not attend the sentencing hearing. I had been caught up enough in the whole mess, and I did not need to watch her downfall in person, but Patricia called me afterward to fill me in. "The judge really hammered her," Patricia said. "He talked about the breach of trust, how she was supposed to be serving her community but instead stole from them." Deborah cried through the whole thing, but the judge did not seem sympathetic. 18 months, and she has to start repaying the money immediately. "How is the HOA handling all this?" I asked. "We are rebuilding. We have implemented new financial controls, requiring 2 signatures on all checks over $500 and mandatory quarterly audits. We have also completely rewritten the enforcement policies to focus on legitimate community concerns rather than petty violations. You know, the stuff we should have been doing all along." "That is good to hear. Brandon, I want to thank you. If you had not pushed back against those ridiculous fines, we might never have discovered what Deborah was doing. She could have stolen twice as much before anyone noticed. You did this community a service, even if it did not feel like it at the time." I appreciated the sentiment, but honestly, I still felt conflicted. I had not set out to expose embezzlement. I just wanted to shovel my driveway in peace. The following months brought more changes to Pine Ridge. We held elections for a new HOA board, and the turnout was massive compared to previous years. People actually cared now, wanting to ensure the HOA served the community's interests. Patricia was elected president officially, and several new board members were brought in, including Thomas, who ran on a platform of common sense over bureaucracy. The HOA dropped dozens of old rules that nobody cared about, like the exact height hedges had to be maintained or what colors you could paint your front door. Instead, they focused on things that actually mattered: maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and negotiating better rates for services like snow removal and landscaping. In August, the HOA even put up a new sign at the neighborhood entrance. Instead of just Pine Ridge, it now said Pine Ridge, a community of neighbors, not rules. It was cheesy, but I appreciated the sentiment. I saw Deborah one more time before she went to prison. It was late September, and I was coming home from work when I spotted her loading boxes into a moving truck outside her house. Michael had gotten the house in the divorce, but he was selling it and moving away, wanting nothing to do with Pine Ridge after everything that had happened. Deborah looked older than I remembered, worn down by months of legal battles and public shame. She saw me and froze, a box in her hands. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she spoke, her voice quiet. "I suppose you are happy about how this turned out." "I am not happy that you are going to prison," I said honestly. "I am not that vindictive, but you are glad I got caught. I am glad you are not running the HOA anymore, and yes, if you stole money, you should face consequences, but I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to shovel my driveway." She set the box down and looked at me directly. "You know what the worst part is? I actually believed I was doing the right thing, enforcing the rules, keeping the neighborhood perfect. I thought I was serving the community. And the money you stole." She flinched. "That started small, just a little here and there to cover expenses that the HOA should have paid for but did not have in the budget. Then it got easier. Nobody was checking. Nobody cared as long as the neighborhood looked good. By the time I realized how much I had taken, I was in too deep to stop." "You could have stopped at any time," I pointed out. "Maybe, probably, but I did not, and now I am paying for it." She picked up the box again. "For what it is worth, you were right. The fine for shoveling was petty and stupid. I was having a bad morning and I took it out on you. If I could go back and change that, I would. Maybe none of this would have happened. Or maybe it would have taken longer for someone to notice the missing money, and you would have stolen even more," I said. "Either way, this was your choice, Deborah, not mine." She nodded slowly and carried the box to the truck. I went into my house and did not look back. Deborah Fletcher reported to prison in October. The HOA received the first restitution payment of $500 from her, with monthly payments scheduled for the next several years. It would take a long time to recover all $37,000, but at least it was something. Life in Pine Ridge returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. The HOA still existed, still collected dues, still maintained common areas. But the atmosphere was different. People were not afraid of getting fined for ridiculous violations anymore. The board focused on being helpful rather than punitive. I kept living my life, waking up early to go to work, shoveling my driveway whenever it snowed, regardless of what time it was. Nobody complained. Nobody fined me. It was amazing how simple things could be when people just acted reasonably. One snowy morning in December, almost a full year after this whole mess started, I was out shoveling at 5:30 a.m. when Thomas came out of his house across the street. He waved at me and grabbed his own shovel. "Need a hand?" he called out. "I am good, but thanks," I replied. He walked over anyway. "I am heading out early too. Figured I would clear the mailbox access road before the postal carrier comes. Want to help?" I smiled. "Sure, why not?" We walked down to the mailbox area together, our shovels over our shoulders, our breath visible in the cold morning air. The access road had a few inches of fresh snow from overnight. Nothing terrible, but enough to make delivery difficult. We worked in comfortable silence, clearing the snow efficiently. Two people with shovels made quick work of it. Within 20 minutes, the access road was clear, and we stood back to admire our work. "You know," Thomas said, "this is how it should be. Neighbors helping neighbors, not some board threatening fines every time someone steps out of line." "Agreed," I said. "That whole thing with Deborah was crazy," he continued. "Who would have thought the HOA president was embezzling money? I mean, I knew she was uptight about rules, but stealing. That is a whole different level. People surprise you," I said diplomatically. "Did you ever think it would end up like that? When you first got that fine for shoveling," I laughed. "Not even close. I just wanted the fine dropped. I did not expect to uncover embezzlement and send someone to prison." "Well, you did the neighborhood a favor, even if it got messy." We walked back toward our houses, the sky just starting to lighten with the approaching dawn. The neighborhood was quiet and peaceful, the way early mornings should be. No HOA presidents measuring the volume of snow shovels. No threatening letters about noise violations. Just people living their lives, maintaining their properties, being reasonable human beings. Margaret came out of her house as we passed, already dressed for the day despite the early hour. "Morning, boys," she called out. "Thank you for clearing the mailbox area. I saw you from my window." "No problem, Margaret," Thomas said. "You know, Brandon," she continued, walking down her driveway to talk to us, "I never properly thanked you for standing up to Deborah last year. That woman made all our lives harder with her constant rules and inspections. I am glad she is gone, even if the circumstances were unfortunate." "You do not need to thank me," I said. "I was just looking out for myself." "Maybe, but you helped all of us in the process." She smiled warmly. "That is what neighbors should do." As I walked back to my house, I thought about how much had changed in a year. How a simple dispute over a shoveling fine had spiraled into an investigation, arrests, prison time, and a complete overhaul of the HOA. It had been exhausting and stressful, but in the end, maybe Margaret was right. Maybe it had been worth it. I showered, got dressed for work, and headed out to my truck. The sun was just coming up, painting the snow-covered neighborhood in shades of pink and gold. Pine Ridge looked peaceful and beautiful, the kind of place anyone would be happy to call home. As I drove past the mailbox area on my way out, I noticed someone had left a thank you note taped to the mailbox cluster. "Thanks for clearing the access road," it said in cheerful handwriting. "Signed, your neighbors." I smiled and kept driving, heading toward another day of work, another day of normal life in a neighborhood that had finally learned what it meant to be a real community. The story could have ended there, but life rarely wraps up that neatly. In February, almost exactly 1 year after the original shoveling incident, I got a letter in the mail from an unfamiliar law firm in Duluth. My first thought was that somehow I was being sued or dragged into more legal drama. My hand actually shook a little as I opened the envelope. Instead, it was a notice that Deborah Fletcher had filed for bankruptcy. As part of her bankruptcy proceedings, she was attempting to discharge the restitution debt she owed to the HOA. The law firm represented the HOA and was asking if I would be willing to provide a victim impact statement explaining how her theft had affected the community. I called Patricia immediately. "Did you know about this?" "Just found out today," she said, sounding tired. Apparently, Deborah is claiming she cannot afford to continue the restitution payments while also supporting herself and paying legal fees. She wants the debt discharged. Can she do that? Maybe. Debts from criminal restitution are supposed to be non-dischargeable in bankruptcy, but her lawyer is apparently arguing some technicality. Our lawyer says it is a long shot, but we need to fight it. If the debt is discharged, we will never recover that money. I agreed to write a statement. I spent that evening drafting something that explained how Deborah's theft had hurt the community, forcing us to raise HOA dues to cover the shortfall, delaying necessary maintenance projects, and breaking the trust that neighbors should have in their elected leaders. The bankruptcy hearing was in March. I did not attend, but Patricia did and reported back that the judge denied Deborah's attempt to discharge the debt. The restitution would continue, though apparently Deborah had argued for and received a reduced payment plan of $250 per month instead of $500. At that rate, it would take over 12 years to repay the full amount. Better than nothing, Patricia said philosophically. And at least the judge made it clear that you cannot steal from people and then just declare bankruptcy to avoid consequences. Spring came to Minnesota, bringing the usual mud and melting snow. The neighborhood looked rough for a few weeks during the thaw, everyone's lawns brown and patchy. In previous years, Deborah would have been sending out warning letters threatening fines for inadequate lawn maintenance. This year, the HOA sent out a newsletter with tips for spring lawn care and offered to coordinate a bulk purchase of grass seed at a discount if enough residents were interested. It was a small thing, but it represented how much the culture had shifted. In April, I got a surprise visit from Detective Morrison. I had not seen her since the investigation wrapped up, and I invited her in, offering coffee. "This is not an official visit," she said, settling into my living room couch. "I just wanted to give you an update on something, off the record." "Okay," I said cautiously. "We have been investigating Deborah Fletcher's activities more broadly, not just the HOA embezzlement. Turns out she was involved in some other questionable financial dealings. Nothing we can charge her with at this point, but she was advising people on tax avoidance schemes that were borderline illegal. A few of her clients are now being audited by the IRS. Seriously. Yeah. She was not a licensed financial advisor or accountant, but she was presenting herself as an expert and charging people for advice. Some of that advice was really bad, and some of her clients are facing penalties. They are considering a civil suit against her, but since she is in prison and has no assets, it probably would not go anywhere." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Detective Morrison shrugged. "Because you were right about her. When you pushed back against those fines, you sensed something was off, even if you did not know what it was. Your instincts were good. Deborah Fletcher was someone who thrived on control and used her authority to cover up unethical and illegal behavior. If more people had questioned her earlier, maybe she would not have been able to do as much damage." "I did not think of it that way," I admitted. "I just did not want to pay an unfair fine. Sometimes doing the right thing starts that simply." She finished her coffee and stood up. "Anyway, I wanted you to know. The case is closed as far as the criminal charges go, but Deborah's impact on people is still unfolding. You might hear from some of her former clients as they deal with their own legal issues." I never did hear from any of those clients, but the revelation that Deborah had been running other schemes made me think about how people can present one face to the world while hiding something very different underneath. She had been the stern, rule-following HOA president, but behind the scenes, she was stealing and scamming. Summer in Pine Ridge was actually pleasant. The HOA organized a neighborhood barbecue in June, the first community event in years that people actually wanted to attend. Nearly every household showed up. There was food, music, kids running around, and a general atmosphere of people actually enjoying each other's company. Thomas had been elected to the board and was doing a great job focusing on practical issues. He organized a neighborhood watch program that was actually about safety, rather than spying on people for HOA violations. He coordinated group negotiations with contractors to get better rates on services like snow removal and lawn care for anyone who wanted to opt in. I even volunteered to help with a few projects, something I never would have considered when Deborah was in charge. We repainted the entrance sign, fixed the broken streetlights, and organized a community garage sale that raised money for improving the playground equipment in the common area. In August, I ran into Michael, Deborah's ex-husband, at a grocery store in Duluth. He had moved out of Pine Ridge months ago, but apparently he still shopped in the area. We made awkward eye contact in the cereal aisle. "Brandon," he said with a nod. "Michael, how are you doing?" He laughed bitterly. "How do you think? Divorced, humiliated, dealing with debt from a marriage that turned out to be built on lies, but I am managing." "I am sorry you got caught up in all that," I said, and I meant it. "It must have been rough." "The worst part was not knowing," he admitted. "I thought we were happy. I thought Deborah was dedicated to the community. I had no idea she was stealing or running scams. When the detective showed me the evidence, I felt like an idiot." "You are not an idiot for trusting your spouse. Maybe." He grabbed a box of cereal and tossed it in his cart. "For what it is worth, I do not blame you. I know Deborah tried to make you the villain in all this, but you were just standing up for yourself. She brought all this on herself." We parted ways after that brief conversation, and I never saw him again. I hoped he managed to rebuild his life, away from the mess that Deborah had created. September marked 1 year since Deborah had gone to prison. The HOA had fully recovered from the scandal, with improved financial controls, better leadership, and a renewed sense of community. The neighborhood felt like a real place to live again, not just a collection of houses governed by arbitrary rules. I got a letter from Deborah in October. It was forwarded through the HOA's lawyer, probably because she did not have my direct address. The envelope had a prison return address, and I almost threw it away without opening it. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten, several pages long. Deborah's handwriting was neat and controlled, just like her personality had always seemed. "Dear Brandon," it began. "I am not sure you will read this, but I am writing it anyway. My therapist here suggests that making amends is an important part of taking responsibility for my actions. I am not asking for your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. Not just about the embezzlement, but about everything. The way I treated you and other neighbors, the petty enforcement of rules, the power-tripping behavior. I used the HOA as a way to feel important and in control, and when you challenged me, it threatened the identity I had built for myself. That is not an excuse, just an explanation. I hurt a lot of people, and I deserve every consequence I am facing. I hope Pine Ridge is doing better without me. I hope you are shoveling your driveway whenever you need to without worrying about fines. Sincerely, Deborah Fletcher." I read the letter twice, trying to decide how I felt about it. Part of me appreciated the acknowledgement, the apology. But another part of me wondered if it was genuine or just something her therapist told her to do. In the end, I decided it did not really matter. Deborah was serving her time, paying her debt, and I had moved on. I wrote a brief response. "Deborah, I received your letter. I appreciate you taking responsibility. The neighborhood is doing well. I wish you the best in moving forward with your life. Brandon." I sent it through the HOA's lawyer and did not expect to hear from her again, and I did not. Winter came again, the cycle of snow and cold that defines Minnesota life. On a Tuesday morning in late January, almost exactly 2 years after the original shoveling incident that started everything, I woke up at 5 a.m. to find 6 inches of fresh snow covering everything. I got dressed, grabbed my shovel, and went outside at 5:15. The air was cold and still, my breath forming clouds. I started clearing my driveway, the familiar scraping sound of shovel against pavement breaking the morning silence. Nobody complained. Nobody fined me. Nobody threatened legal action or accused me of violating noise ordinances. I was just a guy shoveling his driveway so he could get to work. And that, finally, was exactly as it should be. As I finished up and headed back inside to make coffee before my shift, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 2 years. What started as a simple dispute over a petty fine had exposed embezzlement, led to arrests and prison time, and completely transformed how my neighborhood operated. It had been messy, dramatic, and at times overwhelming. But standing there in the quiet morning, my driveway clear, my neighbors still sleeping peacefully, I felt something I had not felt in a long time living in Pine Ridge: contentment. This was my home. These were my neighbors, and we had learned the hard way what it meant to be a real community. I went inside, made my coffee, and got ready for work. Just another day in Pine Ridge, Minnesota, where the HOA finally served the people instead of controlling them, where neighbors helped each other instead of reporting violations, and where a guy could shovel his driveway at 5 in the morning without ending up in a war with the homeowners association. Sometimes the smallest acts of resistance lead to the biggest changes, and sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. The snow kept falling that winter, as it always does in Minnesota, and I kept shoveling early in the morning whenever I needed to. Because that is what you do. You take care of your property, you help your neighbors when you can, and you do not let anyone tell you that doing the right thing at the necessary time is somehow wrong. Deborah Fletcher would be released from prison eventually, would finish her probation, would move on with whatever life she could build after losing everything. The $37,000 would slowly be repaid over many years. The neighborhood would continue to evolve and grow. But the lesson remained. Communities thrive when people treat each other with respect and common sense, not when they hide behind rules and regulations to exercise petty power over others. Pine Ridge learned that lesson the hard way, but it was a lesson worth learning, and me. I was just glad I could shovel my driveway in peace.